Quite a few years ago, when I was pastoring at Hokaloa on the Big Island, they already had an existing ministry for folks without a home, without a house. I don't like to use the word homeless because you can not have a house but have a home. You can make a home anywhere. But they had an effective ministry for the size of the church that they had to those without a house. Food, sometimes money, ministry of presence. But while I was there, some folks began visiting the church that became very interested in this ministry. And they were generous. And I remember one Sunday, there was a call out to the congregation. We've got a family who has 2 children, and both children have physical ailments, problems, challenges, and this family is living on the beach in a tent. And they need housing. They need it now. And so I expected maybe some money to come up out of this. But there was a couple that had recently begun attending, and they joined the church. They were from the West Coast. They came up to us and they said, "We have a timeshare at the resort, and we would love for the family to stay in this timeshare for a month. And then we'll also pay their rent once we find them a place," which I thought was extremely generous. And we did that. I regretted not sitting with them and talking with them through it, and I'll get to that in a minute. So the family did stay in the timeshare. They had a wonderful experience there. They sent us photos and pictures and that sort of thing, and it was a nice respite for them. The problem the church had, or some folks in the church had, is that while they were in the timeshare, the parents did not look for another place to live. And so when they got out of the timeshare, they went straight back to the beach. And they were content with that. That was a normal for them. And so I regret, as a pastor, not walking the couple through this. And let's think about this for a minute. We don't know the folks. Are you okay with this? What if something gets broken? Are you okay with that? Can you cover this? And what if they just use this as a respite, and when they come out of the home, what if they don't find a home? Are you going to be okay with that? I didn't do any of that. And so there were some folks in the church that were a little upset that this family just used this as a respite. But Herschel, like most things, it was a teachable moment, right? The one thing that I could say to them, or hopefully we could talk about, was that Jesus did away with the idea who was deserving and undeserving. Jesus just said, the poor. And as we have heard in the scriptures this morning, Jesus calls us to live generously. Generous with our money, generous with our time, our talents, our love, our prayer, our concern, our lives, our very livelihoods. We live generously. And we're not in the result business. All we can do is put forth what we have, give what we have, and leave the results to God. It was also an opportunity to explain that some folks, because of other illnesses, they may not quite know how to find a home and look for rent, and mental illness and that sort of thing. And the other piece to it is it's a part of our society, right? That says this is what success looks like. Success is owning a home, this and that, and being functional on your feet. It's all about money, right? And possessions. That's oftentimes how we look at success in America. How well we do in that part of life, which the gospel says nothing about. The gospel doesn't say anything about success. The gospel is all about what? Faithfulness. Faithfulness. Jesus never talks about success. And so sure, this family, they had an opportunity to stay in a timeshare. Their children had some rest, a pool. They enjoyed themselves. And guess what? They're back at the beach. They're content with that. So what? We don't give looking for results. We give trusting that God will bring about the results. We don't live generously because we are told to do so or it's the right thing to do. As Christians, as people of faith, we live generously because we serve and we love a generous God. We give out of the generosity of God. God has been generous to us, amen, with life, with presence, with mercy and grace. And out of our experience of the generosity of God, we give of our lives generously. And we trust God with the results. Jeremiah spoke about it, that it's like a potter in the clay. God's got it. God is working it. God is moving. We're called to live, once again, generous lives. Not just with money, but with our presence, our love, our care, our forgiveness, which is a toughie for me, with our very livelihoods to live generous lives. And I want to take this time to thank you for your generosity toward me and my family during a very difficult time, a time in which all of you have gone through. I know you have, so you know where we are. Thank you so much for your generosity toward us, your thoughtfulness, your generosity in so many ways. And I just wanted to share a little bit about my mom in terms of generosity. I couldn't help but think of her because she was a generous woman with her time. She always had her house wide open to people. They could come over. I had friends over all the time. If you stop by during dinner, you don't wait for dinner. You don't wait for us to finish. You come in and you sit down and you have dinner with us. Doesn't matter who you are. If you've had dinner, too bad, you got to have it again. She gave generously of her time in the public school system. That's why I get so annoyed when school teachers are being criticized and our redneck governor puts these mandates on, opens up avenues for teachers to be punished and all that sort of stuff. I'm very protective of public school teachers because they work so hard. I remember my mom would come home from school and still be grading papers late in the night, still be working on lesson plans, talking to parents. She worked on Saturdays sometimes. She was generous with her gift and her gifts for teaching and education. And I put something in the obituary about her experience. It was sort of the epitome of so many other stories about my mom. It was someone that was visiting our hometown, and it's close to the beach, and so they were vacationing, and it was one of Mom's former teachers. And she taught him probably 30 years ago at this time when they were talking. And he was a successful businessman. I used that word, didn't I? Successful. But he was a successful businessman. He was doing well for himself. And he sat down with my mom and he said, "You know, Miss Medlin, I didn't know how to read in the 8th grade. And you sat down with me with a newspaper because you thought that might be what I needed. And you sat down with me after school and you taught me how to read with a newspaper. And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for you." So I thank God for my mom's generosity and how she taught us as children to live generous lives. And I thank you, First Church, for being such a generous church. We know that we are called to live generous lives. We just don't know what God is going to do with our generosity. We don't know, with the grace of God, will do with our generosity. But we can always trust in the graciousness and the generosity of God. Amen. Look around, church family. Look around at one another. Look each other in the eye. Pass the peace of Christ. Namaste. Recognize the love and dignity in each and every one of you. We are the church. Amen. We are called to love one another, to care for one another, to hold one another. Hold one another in prayer. Hold one another emotionally. And sometimes we need to hold one another physically. Amen. And we're called to forgive one another. We're called to join together and stand together against oppression, injustice. We're called to speak truth to power, to take a risk like Jesus did, and to get into some good trouble along the way. Amen. It's another way in which we live generously. Amen. And Paul was asked many, many years ago, Paul, what can separate us from the love of God? Now, if somebody asked me that, I might start thinking, right? Well, this might do it. This could do it. Maybe. But you know what Paul said? Emphatically, he said, nothing. He didn't even hesitate, Larry. He said, nothing can separate us from the love of God. And that is the good news, church. That we are beloved children of the living God. Each and every one of us is a beloved child of the living God. May when we leave this place, we go out into the world and we continue to live like it and to spread that message, that blessing, that all of humanity and all of creation, all is out of the love of God, in the love of God, and shall return to the love of God. Amen.